psychic sheaths and armoring. Two concepts that every moment affect our lives in huge ways that by and large, everyone's just oblivious to.
Awesome.
I mean, it's...
I don't know why you left this till the end of this list.
Because the other things are also absolutely vital and omnipresent. It sounds silly, but with many of these concepts, I'm being honest when I say it's literally as important as if I'm trying to explain the concept of temperature to you. And like, you know how sometimes you feel like more comfortable or less comfortable, or you have this certain experience, and it's like when the temperature goes up and the air vibrates more rapidly, like literally you start to feel warmer, and it's like if you had just no concept of temperature, you just thought it was you just
you'd think you were crazy.
Just sometimes you get all sweaty, sometimes you get all cold and shaky and your hands go numb.
It's just me. I don't know. It's just, I was born with it.
Right. And then someone comes along and is explaining, there's this thing called temperature.
All right.
But so our energy fields are like that. Our ego mind is just registering this stuff we're feeling. And there's literally a weather, to your field. Your field's got stuff going on in it. And your mind is in that weather, trying to interpret it. And so it's the same with what I'm sitting here experiencing as far as the weather in my field. It's like, I'm aware that I can do certain stuff to make the weather go this way or that. I can, if I don't get enough sleep, if I don't eat, if I'm out in the cold, or if I'm stressed out or whatever, it's like, then the weather, that influences my field. But there are also things influencing my field that I'm oblivious to. And so just that shift that to a certain degree, just like the rider on the horse, it's like, can you stop for a minute and bring your attention to body, bring your attention to your energy field, and see that, well, wait, that thing seems to have this existence of its own, right? There seems to be an intelligence, there seems to be a movement, there seems to be an agenda.
Yeah.
That the ego mind actually is oblivious to. Even my finger, it's like my finger's still here, and all the shit I put it through, it still seems to
still sticks around.
It sticks around. As many times as I've cut it, it seems to have healed. As many times as I've jammed it or, squished it.
Yeah.
It repaired itself, and it's still willing to
show up.
Yeah. Show up. And even to mostly do what I'm telling it to do.
Yeah.
Which sounds funny, but it's that's true of our whole, I don't know why my heart's still beating. I don't know why I woke up this morning.
Yeah.
But we just kind of find ourselves here. It's like, okay, what am I doing? But then we just sort of assume the driver's seat and assume responsibility. And we're just like, okay, yep, I got this. I'm in control. I'm driving this thing. So what I'm trying to get at is we make this assumption from our cognitive self as though we're all working from an even playing field, and as though that playing field was like 100% autonomous and 100% free, and as though it's all about choice. It's just like, oh, if we make the right choices, if we make good decisions, or if whatever you envision, blah blah blah, the whole positive thinking, create your own reality.
If you believe you can achieve.
Yeah, right. And I'm not saying there's nothing to that, but it's within a context.
Yeah.
And so, yes, someone can be completely capable, but in their mind be in a state that derails them or disables them. And to the extent that that's the case, then positive thinking or cognitive reframing or anything like that is very good. But at the same time, don't tell some blind person or some disabled person that if they just believed, then they would, don't tell someone in a wheelchair if they just believed, then they could walk,
Mm-hmm.
Like at a certain point, that'd just be cruel.
Yeah.
Because there's also accepting reality, accepting limitation, accepting tragedy, accepting death, accepting loss, accepting failure. So that dynamic between be a winner, be an achiever, think positive, that has its place, and simultaneously, paradoxically, it's in a dialectical relationship with face the truth, allow the loss, allow death, allow limitation. So for our mind to be in relationship to body, and or for our soul to be in relationship to body and or mind, there's the idea of, well, what's truth? What's really there? What's happening? And and the general idea is that we as humans have a very hard time just allowing the truth of something. To sit and just look at some object, whatever, it can be some simple, plain object. The general idea is if you actually opened up and got present and just received, there would be, the general idea is you would see the truth, and the truth would be the way that we would experience the truth would be this blissful, wondrous, wonderful awe at the absolute amazingness of whatever the fuck we're looking at. And we would somehow, if you could really be awake enough, you would see that in that paperclip, or in that, drop of water, or in that whatever you're looking at, that the keys to the whole universe are right there. And you would see that and recognize that, and it would be a release and a relief from all fear and worry and tension. And you would become aware that it's all exactly as it should be, and it's all a wonderful, magnificent joke. It's all a wonderful, magnificent creation. It's all a wonderful, magnificent farce. And at the same time, somehow it's a deeply sacred, poignant, meaningful experience. And it's like, oh yeah, that's I just gave you in a nutshell what every fucking new age, self-help, book has been saying for the past 50 years, right?
Yeah. It's like, where do you find that paperclip?
Yeah. But when you can hear that, and then like you say, you can go on a search for the right paperclip, or you can sit and look at a paperclip and like try to get there.
Imbue it.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you look at like, okay, what are the mechanics of that, right? Just like if you're aware that if you eat a bunch of mushrooms, or if you smoke a bunch of pot, or if you drink a bunch of alcohol, this thing happens. But it's like, okay, but can we deconstruct that? Can you look at what actually happens in the brain, what happens in the bloodstream, what happens in the metabolism? And of course, this idea of experience, right? The human experience. Because you can say, oh, well, Lance has, a 0.2 level alcohol right now. And so that's why he's, whatever. And it's like, yeah, but that only tells you so much, The jump into actual experience is still mysterious. And that's the whole idea with phenomenology and these ideas about suchness, right? Like what is a color, what is a sensation, what is a feeling, and are we can put labels on it, but we can't really grab the experience itself. So with all that in mind, if you look at the actual apparatus with which we experience stuff, right? You have skin, you have eyes, you have ears, you have taste buds, and again, we can say, well, there's these sensory nerve endings, and when those nerve endings are stimulated, it sends us, an innervation, and there's a synapse, and it fires a thing in the brain, and the brain interprets it. And right now, your brain stem is getting tons of information from body, for example, from physical body, right up the spinal cord into the brainstem, and then there's this system of filters, if you will, where it hits a certain place in the brain, and the brain decides what information came in that doesn't need to be responded to, and then a bunch of it gets filtered out and gets sent on to the next place. And the next place in the brain sifts through that information and discards a bunch of it. And a very small little part eventually gets relayed to what we call the ego waking mind. And we become aware of that. And then most of that we just discard. We become aware of it, and then nothing to see there.
Right. This is already so much going on about what it should be.
Yeah, right. And obviously, one of the main things that the mind's doing is it's assessing threat, right? Are you in danger? Are you upright? Are you, are you too hot or too cold? Are you safe right now? Are you going to run into something? So we have this mechanism that's constantly assessing safety, and a huge part of safety, a huge part of self-regulation, self-care, autonomy involves boundary. There's an awareness that, okay, I can't just let that knife, pierce through my skin. I can't just step off this cliff. I can't just let that car run into me. And then even more subtly, it's like, oh, that light's too bright, that temperature's too hot or too cold. The coffee is too hot, it'll burn my tongue. So just, this constant interaction with environment, because we have this fragile system, this fragile body that can be hurt, it can be destroyed, it can be invaded, it can be engulfed, it can be attacked. And we all know this about our physical body. We all know this about our emotional, sexual, mental self. We're all these fragile, whiny little bitches, and simultaneously, weirdly, we're like incredibly resilient.
Yeah.
And also there's this massive variety, right? Like most, if you look at a herd of sheep or a herd of deer or wolves or something, at least to our, common eye, it's like, man, they all look the same. They're all, they all seem rather, they tend to seem rather healthy, and they move in the same way, and it's hard to even pick one out from the other.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at a pack of humans and it's like, man, you got all shapes and sizes, you got all kinds of movement patterns.
Yeah.
Like, look at the way that person's walking, like, what the hell? Doesn't even look like the same species as that other person.
Yeah.
And one way to talk about why that is that humans are interpreting experience and responding not just instinctually like animals. We're interpreting based on all kinds of fucked up ideas. So instead of letting our body naturally respond, we get in there with our ego awareness and decide we need to mediate that, we need to curate that, we need to control that.
Yeah.
We make meaning out of it. We hold on to it. We decide, I'm gonna make this adjustment so that I'd never have to feel that again. And so then you end up with, all these weird patterns in us. And I'm saying that generally speaking, if you sort of cut that part of the brain out, we would just heal and adapt and sort of go back to what our body knows is the right way. Just like movement patterns, you take a child that doesn't have some kind of trauma or something, is going to run in a way that humans ideally run, And it's funny, even in a much smaller context, golfers, for example, we'll talk about it. If you go out and play golf and you haven't played for a while, and you haven't thought about and obsessed about the golf swing, you just take the club, you go out there and you just swing at it without thinking, and you crush it. You hit it, in a way where it's like, oh my God, I never hit it, that well.
Yeah.
And then the golfer goes, now what did I do?
Yeah.
And it's like, now you're fucked.
Yeah.
Like, forget it. You might as well hang the clubs up till next year, because you just fucked it all up. Because your ego mind stepped into the driver's seat.
Try again later.
Yeah. And it's the same with art. If you're trying to write poetry, if you're trying to sing, if you're trying to paint a picture, if it's like, we just know that, okay, you're either in that intuitive creative flow, or your ego mind steps in and now you're jamming it all up.
Yeah.
And the idea with armoring and with psychic sheaths, we don't realize that we've jammed it up in certain ways that we no longer even know about. We've compensated, we've created patterns and filters and walls that are hampering our function. Again, in a similar way that even conceptually, we all know this. Yet we all kind of go about movement in life as though our body, as though we had full mobility. And it's like almost no one has full mobility. Put anyone in a yoga class, no one in there can do the fucking postures the right way.
Yeah.
Like the perfect way the posture is supposed to happen. It's like almost no one can do any of the postures. There's people that are way better, but even the best person in the class, I bet you, someone who really knows their stuff would come in and say, yeah, no, that, you're not quite there.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why not? Because their body can't quite do it.
Right.
And so to allow that, to be aware, like, okay, I'm not operating in some absolute autonomous, free, 100% mobility condition here. I'm operating within this harness that only allows, certain stuff. So to get there is important. And then it's okay, well, but there are some things you can do about that harness, right? There are some things you can do about the patterns that you operate within. There is some, you're operating in a certain computer program, but there is some like updates and some changes that can be made to the program. But that's different than just operating from within the program. Right? And this whole idea of structural work, like in psychotherapy, structural work, or in body work, structural body work, it's looking at the program. It's not just operating from within the program. It's what's the program, and can there be changes in the program? So two of the biggest changes that can be made to our program, physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually, spiritually, has to do with sheaths and has to do with armoring. If I start with armoring, armoring is basically contract. If I point a hose at you, you're probably going to do some kind of contracting, blocking defense.
Yeah.
If it's cold, you're gonna start contracting. If the light's too bright, your pupils are gonna get smaller, and at a certain point, you're gonna close your eyes. You're gonna try to shade yourself, and that would be appropriate. But then, if the light, for example, gets dimmer, well, then you should come out of that, and your pupils should actually dilate, right? Armoring is simply being in the defensive stance when it's not appropriate. And again, we tend to think, no, I only armor when I choose to, and it's like, no, you're walking around,
yeah,
like intensely armored, and you don't even know it. And the reason you can't run right, or the reason your back hurts, or the reason you get headaches, or the reason you have digestive trouble, or the reason that you feel anxious, etc., is because you're defending and contracting your energy fields, collapsing your mind, tightening up your tissue in response to some threat that actually isn't happening right now. And so again, it's another like, okay, you have to like admit and allow for that to see the truth of this stuff, right? And it's like, oh, well, if that's true, like, well, then, it's like, well, yeah, then I'm interested in becoming more aware of like where and how I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Which is not so easy, right? I know for myself, it's like, oh, I read about Rolfing, and it was like, oh, okay, that conceptually I had this understanding, and it's like, let's do it. Let's make my fascial tissue the ideal
right.
way,
Right.
And then later chakras, it was like, oh, hell yeah, let's clear my chakras, like I'm all for it. Let's make them like, I'll take the
so clear.
Yeah, it's like being at the car wash. It's like I'll do the ultimate package,
Yeah, no doubt. That turtle whack.
All right. And then of course you find out, well, what's in the way of, how do you make it? How do you make the tissue let go? And if your tissue is hanging on in a way that it doesn't need to right now, how do you make it let go? And then, as I've said all along, it's like, well, what we tend to do, even if it's my bicep, if my arm's stuck like this, and then you make me aware, Lance, actually your arm should be able to do what your left arm does, which is it should be able to, and I'm like, really? Even this one,
Yeah.
It's like, well, how do I do that? And what most approaches in the world are going to be, well, someone's going to try pulling on my arm. Someone's going to try massaging the bicep. Someone's going to try, working with the nerves in here. Maybe if I ice it, maybe if I put a heat pack, maybe if I shoot it full of cortisone, maybe if I use an electrical stimulator, maybe if I just give it time, maybe if I drink more milk, maybe, and it's like, no, none of that is going to do it. And it's like, well, why not? Well, because the thing that's preventing the movement, yes, is tight tissue, right? But why is the tissue tight? Well, because my energy system and my nervous system are having it be so. Okay, well, why are they doing that? Because I have some kind of thing going on in my mind, a program that's having that be the case. It's like, well, why is that happening? Well, probably some trauma, some character structure, defense, something from the past, a split in ultimately it's a split between my conscious present moment soul awareness and the part of my mind that's having it stay like that. And it's like, well, then that gets, really esoteric. It's like, yep, that's right. It does.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I lost most people at the first step, let alone the 10th step.
Right.
So I've said all this before, but when it comes back to armoring and psychic sheath, if you say that the contraction is an armoring, and again, it's a defense, right? It's a rigidity and a contraction. And so another super important concept that doesn't seem to be well known is there's defense against the external world, right? Like I said, if I'm pointing a hose at you, you're gonna, or if I point a gun at you, or if I'm gonna shoot you with a, throw a ball at you or something, you're gonna defend because there's literally this external object that can be coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all true, and we can be locked in defenses against that. But when it comes down to it, even if it was about some external object, what we're really defending against in our mind is our own experience in our body and in our field. So even if I'm going to spray you with with a hose and it's cold water, your mind, or let me back up. You're going to try to have the cold water not hit your body, right? But once the cold water hits your body, then what you're going to go to work at is having your mind defend against the body experience, right? You're going to contract tissue. You're going to do certain stuff in your nervous system. You're going to do certain stuff in your brain to not be open and present and receiving of the body sensation. Because your mind is like, I don't like that. Even if ultimately your body's fine, the water's not so cold, it's going to damage you or something.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, but it doesn't feel good. It's too, I don't like it. So the mind contracts literally to try to get away from our own experience.
Yeah.
Which is a profound thing. Like you and I are sitting here and we have this mind experience, and we're both terrified of our own bodies. We're terrified of the experience. We're terrified of actually feeling and being in open relationship with what's going on in our body and what's going on in our field. We're both just blocking, like, yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's not all good. There's a lot of bad. There's a lot of, stuff sitting there in your field that's very, very bad, very, very painful, very, very alone, very sad, very empty, very dark, very vicious, very hurt, And it's like, well,
I don't have time for that every day.
Right. And if you did have time, it's too scary, it's too painful, it's too overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then it's not just that it's too painful, because that's one thing, and it's too painful. A lot of it's too painful, but even worse, it's too confusing. We don't even know what it derails us. It destabilizes us.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to have an awareness. Okay, look, this is what's happening. This is what needs to happen. And so, all right, I'm gonna tolerate this pain right now. That's different than, I don't know, I feel fucked up and vulnerable and confused and disoriented. And the experience I'm having doesn't make sense to me, and it makes me feel bad about myself, and it makes me feel confused, and it's just like, then it's like, well, God, it's no wonder, that people can't just say, okay, let's just do it. There's tremendous defense against all that. So it's not only too hard to do it if you actually do it, right? Just suffer the terrible, empty, alone, vulnerable, powerless experience. And it's like, okay, even if you say, all right, I'm going to get on board with that. Conceptually, yep, I get that that's the thing I need to do. Okay, I'm going to go into that. Deciding to go into that's one thing. Actually doing it is another.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna get kicked right back out of it.
Right.
And
then you just move on.
Yeah. You're like, well, I did it. In addition, you have tremendously sophisticated, powerful defense mechanisms preventing you from ever even getting into it. We all do, right?
Yeah.
And those defense mechanisms, again, they're very sophisticated. And one of the best tricks that we play is that most of those defense mechanisms, you have no fucking idea you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, this is a fucked up game we're all trying to play,
Yeah.
And even if I become aware of a defense you're doing and try to point it out to you,
That's
it's
explosive.
like, well, now,
yeah,
now you and I have a problem.
Right.
Relationship over.
I was trying to keep my problem to myself. I don't know why.
Yeah.
You had to point it out.
Right. But again, it's like, I'm not even exaggerating. Like, this seems to be the situation.
Yeah.
For every person. So armoring is a contracting in the energy field and in the body. You can't contract in your energy field without there being a tissue response. You can't try to repress something. You can't try to cope. You can't try to block out mentally and emotionally without also doing so physically. Which, again, another big truth bomb, It's like, wow, that has huge implications, right? And it goes the same way in reverse. You can't let go of a tissue contraction, of a nervous system contraction, of an energy field contraction without the associated content then surfacing. Now, you may experience that as just being tired. You may experience it as a headache. You may experience it as sadness. You may experience it as a thoughts or memories, but it's gonna move and do its thing.
Yeah.
So armoring is not just blocking external environment. Armoring is me contracting in my tissue and in my energy field so that I can prevent the movement through the meridians, through the fascial tissue, through the field. And why would I do that? So that it doesn't reach my mind. Right? If something's happening to my hand and it's painful, I'm going to start to contract along the pathways, right? The nerve pathways, the energy pathways that are sending me a message that this bad, painful thing's happening to my hand. And at a certain point, I'm gonna contract in my mind. I'm gonna contract from the pain. I'm gonna try to get away from the fact that, oh my God, my hand's being, crushed or whatever. And like I've said before, if the thing lets go, it's like, all right, I might come out of the mind contraction, and I might even come down out of the body contraction, and I may get back in my hand, and okay, But trauma is when, boom, it splits, and like, I don't even know that's pattern's still there. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
All I know is like, I got this really stiff neck and my shoulders, and it's like, well, it's because that part of those lines are still all contracted.
Yeah.
I can be like, no, that was years ago. It's like, so like, it's
right.
still, you're, and I can just see, they're like, yeah, but that was years ago. I'm not like, I don't still have remnants of that. It's like, you can see it, you know?
Yeah.
But so again, just to try to zoom in on this armoring thing, it's like, why armoring? Again, me going like this doesn't help me get the fucking thing off my hand, right? Like, that's different than me going into get the fuck off, you know, or get my hand out of there, or like, that's different. Armoring is just protecting your mind against the experience. That's armoring. So it's an important distinction, right? And we should armor in the moment to varying degrees, right? Let me rephrase that. It's okay to armor, but ideally you could just face the reality. Ideally, you could say, you know, you could just go into the, oh my God, my finger's caught in the door jamb. You know, this is crushing my finger. It's super painful. And you go to work at trying to get the problem solved, right?
Yeah.
Whereas to just sit there and like that doesn't help you get your finger out of the door jamb. But we have to armor, we have to block, we have to repress in order to stay sane. Another important concept.
Okay.
We literally cannot handle reality. Like, no one can. We're too small, we're too vulnerable, we're too powerless, we're too confused, we're too, you know, overwhelmed by our own desires to deal. So we're all,
that's our default state.
Yeah. Well, that's the truth. And so our default state is to be narcissistic.
Okay.
Meaning we just project, you know, out and are in this state as though it's all under control. You know, and as though like we get it all, we understand it, we're in full command.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts.
The psychotic, schizoid, you know, this idea of the core, right, and the moving out, or if you make it a vertical scale, because I'm like you said, the default state was that, and then I said, well, the default state actually, I think a better way to say it is the original state is just psychotic. Then the next state is schizophrenic. And then the next state is paranoid. So you have your paranoid schizoid place, right? That's not just full-blown psychotic, but is at least organized enough to just be paranoid schizoid. Now, maybe that person still needs to be in a mental institution, but it's different than just full-blown psychotic. And then from paranoid schizoid, the next level of organization that ideally happens in the mind is just absolutely narcissistic. Then the paranoid schizoid comes to rest. Is organized. Is the let me rephrase that. It doesn't come to rest, but the person comes to rest because they develop up out of that level, and they just assume the narcissistic state. narcissistic stance towards the world, if you will, that instead of, oh my God, I'm completely overwhelmed by the environment, right? The literally something happens in the mind and in the field where it shifts, and self is no longer located as this thing that's overwhelmed. Self becomes the world that was overwhelming you, which is this strange thing that humans are capable of doing. So instead of you getting pelted by the rain, you become, like, your sense of self is the rain pelting you. Instead of your overwhelming mother, you become mother. Like our mind literally shifts and anchors in the thing, which is this weird, phenomenon. And it's incredibly convincing, and it's incredibly tenacious.
Yeah. So it's like you are identifying as, or anchoring into things that were overwhelming you, and then identifying as them.
Yeah.
So like the armoring is like part of it's what's holding it up, is it's also your identification with the thing that caused the armoring.
Yep.
It seems impossible though. I mean, I know it's not, but like that seems like a lot to differentiate from them.
Right. If you think about, if you watch a movie, you suspend disbelief. You go into the movie, even though the movie isn't your entire visual field, you start not noticing anything outside of that. You literally like go in, you get caught in the narrative, and often you identify as one of the characters.
Yeah.
And then that character experiences a victory, and you get flooded with euphoria. That character experiences defeat. You cry. The monster jumps out from behind the bushes and attacks that character, and you freak out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and it's just amazing, the mind's ability to, go there. And so I'm just pointing that out as a way that our mind, our mind does that when we don't realize it. If, most of us are aware, like, I know it's a movie. I was taking the ride, but as I sit here looking at you, I'm doing a bunch of that, anchoring self and taking a ride and having an experience that also isn't the truth.
Yeah, right.
But I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah, it is, like, or no, I'm not, I'm just being awake and me and in reality right now. It's like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You're in a movie. And it's like, well, okay, take me out of the movie. How do I come out of the movie?
There's like a felt shift there. I mean, it's like there's a layer of reality that you're identifying with.
Right.
It's like coming out of that and being like, no, it's like this thing. It's also this idea that we're both creating that at the same time too. So it's like this, creating a movie together. And then it's like, if you step out of that, it's like, oh, who am I now? Who was that was doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. And you step out of that and it's like, oh my God, that was just a matrix.
Yeah.
And then you're like, but wait, now like, like Morpheus is standing there.
Yeah. Right. Where'd he come from?
He's like, you're the one, Jeff.
Yeah, right. Is this I think the word is like a vignette.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like, you're kind of watching this vignette take place.
Yeah.
And if you step out of it while everyone else is in it, it causes like, it's disorienting.
Yeah.
And then you can almost, like we talked about a couple weeks back, like the imaginal and like just the sense of play. Mm-hmm. That there's some, when you step out of it, I think is related to that but creativity, because it's not spontaneous like this. If you're just in that, it's not spontaneous, it's scripted. Like, that's the movie part of it. I like the analogy. I don't know. It feels like one of those analogies you've been trying to get across for a while. It didn't make sense.
And you just popped out of the matrix. Now your life's fucked.
No, it feels pretty familiar. It's not.
Okay. It was already fucked.
Yeah, it's just a good way to describe it. Gonna be fine.
So if that's how our mind works, then of course it brings the question, well, what's real, right? What's true? What's the accurate vignette, you know?
Yeah.
And of course the general idea is, well, we don't know.
Right.
We don't know. And it seems that we can't know, at least not cognitively rational.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, well, then what's there? Chaos. And again, then it's you look and, well, how do we experience chaos in our own psyche? How do we experience chaos in our own body? And it's like, well, you experience it as hell.
Yeah.
That's how you experience it. Because it brings primal terror and primal rage. A deep, intense inferno and or a deep, intense abyss. And it's like, you know, and it's all the things that we as humans consider the worst, you know.
Mm.
You know, what is absolute destruction? You know, it's like, for example, being on fire. You know, it's like fire is just going to absolutely fucking destroy you. It's just, or getting absolutely crushed or cut to pieces. It's just that. It's that kind of experience in the mind of violation, annihilation, just taking the organization that your system has going and just undoing it, right?
Yeah.
And our mind, it's like, well, what does our mind think about that? Our mind doesn't like that. Yeah. Our mind is set, you know, the nature of our mind is that we don't, like, we're trying to have that not happen to us. And or we can get bent on trying to make that happen to us.
Yeah. Hmm.
And or we can decide, in order for me to maintain my organization and structure, I need to fucking annihilate that thing, right?
Yeah.
I need to put that fire out. I need to kill that wild animal. I need to, you know, at least I need to run and get away from that thing.
Mm.
I need to get off the fucking track because here comes a train and it's gonna fuck me up if I don't get away. So our mind doesn't want certain experiences. We don't want pain. We don't want confusion. We don't want certain kinds of tension. We don't want certain kinds of threat.
No.
And we have all these ideas about what's pleasurable versus what's painful. We have ideas about what's good and what's bad, what's shameful versus what's heroic. And we're flooded constantly, not just with threat in the environment, and not just confusion about how to deal with the threat, and not just confusion about what is actually a threat and what's not. Should you just get in the water, and yeah, it's cold, whatever, but it's actually good for you and it's not going to harm you. And so get in the fucking cold water, and swim across the river in order to get where you need to go, or wash yourself off or whatever, and shut up about the fucking coldness. Just, adjust your mind to fucking deal. And there's a place for that in life, obviously.
Yeah.
So my point is, but we're confused. Like, some people, well, everyone at every given moment, we all have our little idiosyncrasies. And, I like it a little bit warmer, and I like very detailed, we're very sensitive, or we have the ability to be very sensitive. And in certain ways, that's very good, that we can get more and more refined. We're talking about coffee, and you're saying that, when this frozen concentrate thing, the coffee, it just tastes, there's something very subtle in the flavor that and it's worth it. And you could say, just shut up and quit being so sensitive and just drink the coffee. And it's like, well, yeah,
it's not as fun.
Yeah. I mean, if the goal was to get coffee drank, then sure. But if the goal is to like have this enjoyable experience,
yeah,
it's okay to get super sensitive, right? But point is, we all have these little programs of how sensitive and what do we like and what do we don't. And so we're either liking it or we're suffering it, even though ultimately it's not. There's a difference between cold that's going to kill you or heat that's going to kill you, and just cold or heat that's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But our mind can have this really big reaction. Even with fashion, you can look at, someone can be wearing, and it's like, oh my God, those pants and those shoes, like, but it's almost like it's
invading.
Like it's hurting your mind,
Yeah. I can't hold space for that outfit.
Right. It's like, no, my mind just can't do it. Yeah. It's too awful. So if we know that okay, the mind isn't our minds aren't accurately sending messages as to how big of a threat.
Yeah.
Right. So that concept, and then your mind is not accurately, or let me say this, whatever it was that happened to you, whatever trauma, whatever accident you were in, whatever sexual abuse, whatever rejection, happened, if right now in the moment that's not happening, then the experience that you blocked and defended against, right? Or actually, let me just back up one second. When we contract an armor, the experience that we're defending against, even if okay, now the person that was going to hit you doesn't hit you, and now they leave, the experience that you went into that you were blocking against, it's still sitting there. That fear, for example, the rejection that made you feel embarrassed and hurt, to the extent that you contract against it, 50 years later, it's still just sitting there.
Yeah.
Like the vibratory frequency or the vibratory signature is just sitting there in your tissue, in your field.
Yeah.
And so you're walking around the rest of your life guarding, and now, and then someone mentions so-and-so, and you're like, don't mention her.
Yeah.
Because there's that feeling, it's still there. And it's just sitting there waiting, just queued up to go through your mind.
Yeah. Queued up. It's just it's in line. It's just waiting.
Yeah. Sitting in the queue. And it's like, yeah, but I'm armored against that. And then it's like, how come you haven't been in a like open, like loving relationship since? Well, because I'm armored against that thing. And so when the new person comes, it's like, no, I'm like, that pathway is armored.
Yeah.
And that's why the new person is like, I think you're still hung up on so-and-so, and I think you're afraid to be loved. And and it's like, what do you mean?
What? Mind your own business.
Right. Okay, but so that topic that, okay, look, if you go and you get in a safe place, then it's like, okay, now just let all the past stuff move. Like just know that, look, it apparently didn't kill you. It's already in your field. It's not like, it's not like the bullet that was going to hit me, I armored, and so now it's just sitting there. But now if I let go of the armoring, the bullet's going to hit me and
right.
kill me. It's like, no, the vibratory frequency is not going to kill you. It might destroy your fucking idea of yourself. It might destroy your idea of your loved one. It might destabilize your whole fucking psyche.
Yeah.
And we all have certain stuff that indeed will do that. It's like, if you just push the right button.
Yeah.
Any one of us, if you push the right button, we become an absolute monster, or we become a sniveling, terrified little
right
infant. Like that's all still there. So if we know that, and we know that, okay, wait, even if you get to where, okay, I'm safe, none of that's happening, and it's like, all right, let's do this. Let's let it all run through. And if it makes me crazy, if it makes me psychotic, if it makes me crawling up in the fetal, if it makes me tear the room apart, like, all right, so be it. Like, let's just have it out. And we all kind of attempt to do that occasionally, right?
Mm-hmm.
We go in our bedroom and we close the door and we just go ahead and collapse and bawl. Or we decide, we just drink the whole fucking bottle of whiskey and just decide, fuck it, I'm just descending into, or I'm just going to rage and tear the whole fucking room apart. And you go into thing and you kind of come out the other end and hopefully you didn't do too much damage. And then often it's like, okay, well, that did something. It didn't fix everything, but there was some kind of processing. And sometimes that can be quite terrifying. You can go in the room and cry and you know what's happening, you need to do it, or you can hit where it's like, oh my God, I'm dying, or there's stuff starting to move in me that I don't even understand, or I think I'm a bad person.
Right.
But it's a whole perspective shift when you understand that, look, you're walking around loaded with stuff that isn't about your immediate environment. Right. Again, it's this shift where it's like, oh, I'm not just afraid of all this and judgmental of all this. I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of my own internal experience. I'm afraid of my own body. I'm afraid of the energy. I'm afraid of the vibrations in my own energy field. So, but again, if you adopt the viewpoint that, but ideally I would open up to that. Ideally, I would become aware of. Ideally, I would let that energy move. Even though my mind goes, well, I don't want to feel scared. I don't want to feel vulnerable. I don't want to feel rejected. I don't want to feel humiliated. I don't want to feel vengeful. I don't want to feel aggressive rape energy. I don't want to, and it's like, well, of course you don't. No one's, I'm not saying that you should want to. I'm just saying it's in there and it needs to move. And that you're going to become a deeper, richer, healthier, more awake person the more you let move.
Mm.
And you're going to become aware that, yes, you're a killer. Yes, you're an idiot. Yes, you're, all the bad things, meaning those are all in there. But you're also going to become aware, oh, so is everyone else.
Right.
And so you're going to be actually more connected to humanity, more awake. You're going to become aware that the world is a darker place than you thought it was.
Yeah.
A more dangerous place than you thought it was. You're going to realize you're not as big or as important as you thought you were. There's going to be a bunch of disillusioning things. But simultaneously, you're going to get let off the hook in all kinds of ways that right now you've got yourself on the hook.
Right.
Thinking this is all you're doing and you're responsible for it. Versus being able to just see the truth that, okay, wait a second, you're just one of the many different factors. So that concept that ideally I would let this stuff move, even if it feels wrong, even if it feels bad, even though it's absolutely counter to what I wish was so. And then of course look, none of it is self. If you have murderous rage that starts moving, it doesn't mean that's who you are. It means that's moving. And if you have murderous rage, it doesn't mean, well, now you just have to be that for the rest of your life. Just murderous rage. That's what you have to feel. It's like, no, you can feel weak and helpless, and that's fine. It doesn't mean you'll never be strong again.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, oh, wait a second. So I have freedom to just kind of, let any of it move and do what it wants to do. It's like, what if I feel like a big, like, arrogant asshole? It's like, yeah, do that.
Yeah.
That's no different than like laying down and crying.
Yeah.
Like, do that. But just do it in the right context. Don't become president of the United States. Just do it in your living room and then allow the world to contain you and challenge you and then receive the feedback that, okay, maybe I'm not.
Yeah.
And then go ahead and feel the disappointment and of that.
Right. Oh, not this time.
So that's just growth, right? And I think we're supposed to do that. We're supposed to try to dominate the world. We're supposed to get checked by world. We're supposed to be mad about it. We're supposed to cry unfairness. And world's supposed to say, yeah, no, sit down. And we're supposed to, process that and be like, all right,
Yeah.
And actually, oh, thank God I'm not ruler of the world,
Right.
Because the truth is I was way overextended.
Right.
The truth is I was totally winging it, trying to pretend that,
Yeah.
I had this. So again, it's another very important shift in mindset, and shift in like, well, what's the model and how does it work, right? Because I'm hitting these very important little steps, because if you see it the other way, then you're going to operate the other way. Does that make sense when I say that?
Yeah.
Okay. So you aren't your experience. If you're experiencing joy and love, it's like, good for you. It doesn't mean that you're some like awesome person.
Yeah.
It just means you're experiencing joy and love.
Yeah.
And that's great. Sure. And, you know, bring some of that my way. Great.
Yeah.
I'd rather be around that than if you're being super negative and whatever. Unless I'm wanting to process some of my own negative, and then I'm gonna be like, get the fuck out of here with your joy and love.
Yeah.
I want to resonate with someone that feels like shit right now. Because that'll help me move some of my, you know.
Right.
Okay, so we're guarding against our own experience. Our mind's afraid of it. Our mind has ideas about what it means. The truth is, it doesn't mean anything. If our mind can just let it move and allow that that's not me, it's an experience, and whether it's good or bad, let it move. And then an understanding that, oh, then I become more awake and more aware and more mature and more experienced. And, oh, I see more and more that everyone else has the same shit going on in them as I do in me. So you feel more connected. You have more of an understanding of how life works. That's all good. But it also brings the question of, okay, but then what am I really? Who am I really?
Yeah.
Because now I'm not afraid of any of that anger, and now I'm not afraid of the fear, and now I'm not afraid of all that weird sexual shit that goes on in my mind, and now I'm not, you know, now I'm more excited, like, okay, it is what it is, like, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, but then who am I, and what's truth, and what should I like invest in, and what should I give a shit about then?
Yeah.
And the existential view is, you have total freedom to decide for yourself.
It's like, well, then I'll go back to the identifying with something else.
Yeah. So that freedom is terrifying.
Yeah.
That sense that you have freedom is terrifying.
Yeah.
Now, I'm in that camp that would argue you never really get there. You never clear the whole thing. So you don't really have freedom. You're still largely just, you know, your experience is curated by what's going on in your, you know, you could say your karma or your body or your field or your. But even when we start to sense, oh my gosh, I don't know what to orient to, I feel a sense of like open options. We freak out. We have anxiety. We get depressed. We get suicidal. Like literally, that's what happens in a human mind when we have too much choice. Right? We get paralyzed. Right? They even just on mundane levels. You know, if you go to buy a bar of soap and there's 20 different brands of bars of soap, it's not pleasant. Our minds don't do well, and we literally, you know, how there's all they've done all this testing where we, like, the human mind starts to decompensate.
Yeah.
And we get less functional, less safe, and less stable when we have too much freedom.
Yeah.
Too much choice. So people hitting emptiness, existential dread, existential terror, identity crisis. That's what's there when our mind isn't just locked on these other things, right? When our mind actually just starts letting it flow. And or there's the huge problem that when we just start letting our system flow, and we're not all these ways that we were defended and in this pattern, it's like, oh, we loosened, and it's all starting to flow more, and oh yeah, I'm not as tight and I function better. And it's like, oh shit, that flow, you know, it's like that faucet that you turned on, right? That flow that's moving. It's like, there's like primal shit in that flow. That flow is not what we thought it was.
Yeah.
And we start recognizing that if our mind goes more and more to the, deep towards the origin of that flow, we start noticing, whoa, wait a minute, that's all the bad stuff. That's all the stuff that's bad. It's death, it's annihilation, it's aggression, it's, chaos. In Carl Jung's view, which I agree with, the unconscious in each person goes all the way down to hell. And the energies that are coming up from there are the same energies that make the flower garden grow. It's the same energies that make us be able to find sophisticated, loving acts. And I'm saying that the more you let go in the mind of grabbing onto all this other stuff and just be there and let the flow occur, and let your mind actually look at, wait, what is this actually, versus me just being identified with all this. It's like, holy shit, I'm the devil. Which sounds cheesy to say that, but it's like, that's what we're hit with. We're hit with this self-destructive, maniacal experience. And generally speaking, Freud saw it that way. And Freud said that's why we need to anchor in these healthy ego structures. And Jung said, yes, but the spiritual realization path would involve going into that. And Jung was saying, and look, that's what all these other traditions are saying. That's why Christ faced the devil.
Yeah.
That's the Buddha sat under the tree and cleared all his lifetimes of karma. Right? And in my mind, that's him. The idea is he opened his mind and let all the, stuff move. And he cleared lifetimes of trauma. Muhammad had his realization, had his hookup, and spent like several weeks writhing in terrible, awful, pain and torment. And that tends to be the story you hear about these figures that, are supposed to have.
Yeah.
That it's like they went through this really fucked up process first. And to some little degree, that happened to me. And it's happened to all of us to some degree.
Yeah.
So again, to be aware that, like, look, that's the situation. Like, it's not just, let me just have my thoughts. It's like, no, are you driving a motorboat or are you sailing? Because if you're sailing, it's a whole different deal. And you have a whole different relationship to the wind, for example. And it's like, look, this thing up here in my head, I think it's more of a sail. And these energies in me are the wind. And when I go into trying to be a motorboat, and there's times when I need to do that, but then I'm not really functioning in a present way.
Yeah.
I'm going to fucking take control of this situation right now and have my will be done. And again, if my finger's caught in a door jam, I'm going to go into that kind of state.
Yeah.
And try to get whatever needs to happen to get my finger out of there. But ideally, I don't stay in that state when I go to McDonald's and try to order my cheeseburger.
Yeah.
The person behind the counter is going to be like, fuck you. And God forbid they don't get my order right, because then I'm going to just lose my shit.
Yeah.
Because the world's not operating according to my... And we're constantly in that balance between, am I rolling with it or am I trying to make it happen my way?
Right.
And again, sailing isn't just I'm not saying just get knocked over by the wind and die. I'm saying,
use it.
Yeah, use it. Use it. Use your rage, use your terror, use your grief, use your overwhelm, use your sense of tragedy, use your sense of embarrassment and your sense of resentment. Let them move, let it be there, understand them.
Yeah. They're yours.
And the idea is that they're all there, they're all available. Right now, as you sit there, the whole frequency range of energies are available to you.
Right.
Whatever that means. And they're, in general, they're available. Now there's ideas about before Jesus, the Christ consciousness, the Christ energetic wasn't there. And I don't know if that's true or not, but the idea is that Jesus came in and anchored the Christ thing here for us humans on planet Earth. Now, again, it's a cool story. I have no idea.
Yeah. It's a neat idea.
Yeah. But generally speaking, the happy, sad, embarrassed, vengeful, disappointed, super excited, they're all available to you sitting there, and they're all available to me. It's just, what are we allowing?
Yeah.
Versus what are we hanging on to? And so armoring is a contraction in our system to stop the flow of the vibratory frequency, and it's to stop it from reaching our minds. And the reason we do it is because it conflicts. In general, it's not, because it's so painful. That's not really why we tend to armor. We armor because we think it's wrong to let it move. So obviously we didn't even get to psychic sheaths, but I think there's more important stuff to say right around there as far as our own little ethical, moral code as far as what should we let move and what should we not.
Okay. I'll make a note.
Cool. I feel like I was in a...
We'll get back into it. I just mean, like, I think it was I'll pick it back up because I think it was really good. Okay. It's kind of like, it's just another layer to it, right? So, I mean, there's just like, you keep like digging. That's the other thing that you haven't really talked about is like armoring, even around the same thing, seems like there's different layers of it.
Yeah.
Like experiences build up. So then it's like, and they seem to have different depths of significance, even around the same defense.
Yeah.
And then there's also the whole thing of like, what are you seeking out unconsciously to reinforce that armoring?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot to, this is still like, you're about to turn into like another like layer of it.
Right.
Which I think is an okay time to stop.
If you want to learn more about the Dimension Approach, please visit dimensionapproach.com.